Casey Hunt, let's look at some of these polls that caused the president to blow up. These are the public polls. Latest USA Today Suffolk University poll shows the president trailing Joe Biden nationally by 10 points. The latest Economist YouGov poll has him trailing Biden by 6 points. The latest Emerson College poll has Trump down 6 nationally as well. Now, looking at the battleground states here, the latest Fox News polls show President Trump trailing Joe Biden by 8 points in Pennsylvania and in Michigan, and by 3 points in Florida. In New Hampshire, President Trump trails by 8. In North Carolina, he's down 5. In the state of Texas, the president in a statistical tie with Joe Biden in Texas. And in the president's home state of New York, Trump trails by 36 points. So, Casey, these are the public polls. The internal polls are what Brad Parscale and the campaign team presented last week, according to Jonathan's reporting, NBC's reporting, and a bunch of other outlets, showed Donald Trump these polls. His reaction was not to be concerned and to wonder about what they had to do to change direction, but was to scream and threaten a lawsuit to his campaign manager, Brad Parscale.
Which seems to be, first of all, the opposite of what Brad Parscale and his campaign were trying to achieve by doing this with the president. They're the ones, in any single given poll could be right or wrong in the end of this, but every campaign is looking at trend lines, both in their internal numbers and their the public numbers that we just walked through. And the trend lines right now for this president show that he needs to do something to turn it around. And his advisors felt that the situation was so serious that they needed to risk a confrontation with a boss that they know to be volatile in this way. And they went ahead and did it anyway. And this was the result. And you can see, from all of the public facing events that happened, it culminated in the president talking about injecting disinfectants in this incredibly, irresponsible and dangerous set of statements that he made that could potentially endanger folks' lives, as, the governors of the states that had to deal with the fallout have said publicly. And this has gotten to the point where, the National Senate Republican Senatorial Committee is telling, vulnerable senators that the best way to go forward with their own campaigns as they try to deal with the fallout, help their constituents, and get reelected is not to defend the president. The advice is, well, turn it immediately, attack China for the origins of the virus. Fine, we can talk about the value of that separately, but the ultimate point is that there is no ground to stand on for these Republicans when it comes to what the president is saying and doing and how he is handling this virus. This is something that is a huge challenge for all of them, and there's still no evidence. I mean, Mitch McConnell was on TV this week saying we're not where we need to be on testing. And, I don't think for anyone who's looking at this, how do they fix these political problems, fix the economic problems and political problems if we don't fix the medical problems? It's a broken record, but that's the reality.
So Mitch McConnell worrying about testing, says we're not where we need to be. The Republican Senatorial Committee is saying, save yourself, don't defend Trump. If you look at these numbers, Trump getting crushed in Pennsylvania, Trump getting crushed in Michigan, Trump getting crushed in New Hampshire, 3 swing states, Trump losing by 5 points in North Carolina, even down in a poll yesterday in Texas, getting crushed among seniors in the state of Florida. Casey, that obviously is translating as well to Republican incumbents getting crushed in Arizona in public polling, getting crushed in Colorado in public polling, getting crushed approval ratings for Susan Collins in Maine. They're just crushing loss for her up there right now. She could have a crushing loss. Is there a growing understanding among the Republicans that you were speaking to on the Hill that Donald Trump could be leading them into a political bloodbath this fall?
I think that they're all acutely aware that this scenario is terrible for their own political futures, and that right now it is on a track that is getting worse and not better. And they're in the same bind they've been all the way along, right? Republicans, for the most part, are still with the president, but when you start to look at the way people are engaged in a way that they weren't before, Trump was relying on making this about his core supporters, going to the polls. He was going to energize them. He wasn't going to focus on the rest of the country. And when we were facing, a polarized electorate that was talking about culture war style issues every day, that may have been a strategy that was going to work. But what's been shifting aggressively are the numbers among independents in particular. Are really, really concerning. The senior numbers that we've talked about, I mean, these in theory, many of these people could be part of the president's core base. Certainly, if you're looking at, if those numbers that we're seeing out of Florida with seniors hold, it's incredibly difficult to see how he wins the state of Florida. And if the state of Florida is off the map, it's very hard to see how he gets reelected. So, the hemorrhaging in all of the other places is, very, very challenging for any Republican who is trying to get elected in a place where their race is competitive. I mean, we were not previously talking about a realistic chance that the Senate was going to flip hands this cycle. 2 years, kind of a different deal. But for this situation right now, I mean, the idea that you could have Chuck Schumer being the majority leader instead of the minority leader is not unrealistic. And I think you can see that fear in how Mitch McConnell acts every day.
And, Joe, I just want to circle back to those meetings and the phone calls that the campaign team with the president had while he was in the White House last week over the course of 3 days. They began on Wednesday. So Wednesday, as is reported by multiple outlets, including NBC, is when Brad Parscale, the campaign manager, presented those polls and said, we think you should dial back your coronavirus briefings. That's Wednesday. What did the president do on Thursday? That's the day he infamously went to the podium and suggested and mused to his doctors, wondered aloud about injecting disinfectant and sunlight into the human body, making their point for them.
Yeah, making their point for them.
I ask.
It's just unbelievable.
At this point, it's a fair question. What's going on here?
Yeah, it has to be disturbing to people who are around him.
Can you imagine being Brad Parscale?
Especially disturbing to Republicans whose political future depends on him. They have sold their political souls to Donald Trump over the past 3 years.
Ask the governor of Georgia how that went for him.
Yeah, he got thrown under the bus after Donald Trump called him the night before saying, hey, open up your state. Mike Pence called him the night before, said, open up your state. I said he was going to open up the state, then he got thrown under the bus. Mitt Romney seems to be the only person who actually is a Republican that's in Washington, D.C., who's speaking the truth. Of course, you've got governors like Mike DeWine in Ohio, who has been bold and has had great leadership, and his poll numbers are being rewarded. Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, another Republican, his poll numbers being rewarded. Larry Hogan in Maryland, his poll numbers are being rewarded. You get rewarded for protecting people's lives. And this is Donald Trump's biggest problem right now. And, Donald Trump is a one-trick pony. He thinks that he can only win by starting a culture war somewhere, whether it's watching an NFL game and talking about the American flag, or whether it's abortion, or whether it's guns. He has to try to cling hold to something that is going to divide Americans along cultural lines, along tribal lines. The problem here is he made the mistake of seeing protests that represented the viewpoint of 10% of Americans. Another way to put that is it didn't represent the viewpoint of 90% of Americans. When you have, as Willie keeps saying, when you have polls that show 90% of Americans don't want to rush back into restaurants, 85% of Americans don't want to go back to school.
They don't want to get the virus.
They don't want their kids to go back to school. They're not ready yet. Why? Because Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and they're doctors.
We don't have testing.
They're doctors that they have known for 25, 30 years. They're family doctors. They're Marcus Welby's. If you're old enough to remember who Marcus Welby is, those people are saying, whoa, no, hold on, calm down. This is dangerous. Let's just don't listen to politicians, listen to medical professionals, and save yourself, seniors. Save your children. Telling parents how to save their children, protect their grandparents. And so you can't make a cultural. Donald, I don't know how many times I have to tell you this. Let me try one more time.
Don't. It's not
You
worth it.
can't make a cultural war out of a pandemic, all right? And I will say it again, as I've said it on this show repeatedly. This is a medical crisis. When you take care of the medical crisis, then the economic crisis will resolve itself. Now, what you have done is you've taken a medical crisis and seen this economic crisis grow, which you actually threatened to make worse by pushing governors to rush back too quickly before your own guidelines that you just put out last week. And now you've turned it into, wait for it, because you didn't listen to anybody around you. You certainly didn't listen to what we were saying on this show. You've turned it into a political crisis for yourself. So I'm just going to assume that you only care about your political standing.
Well,
so let me help you out here. What's best for you politically is best for the country economically, is best for Americans and their health. Listen to Dr. Fauci. Follow what Dr. Fauci says, and everything will fall in line. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I'm getting kind of tired of saying it. It's the truth. It's what all the people around you want to do, but you're just not listening, all right? And talking about injecting disinfectants the day after your campaign tries to intervene, that just suggests that you're not well right now, all right? So take a step back. Maybe try mindfulness. I don't know if you've ever tried mindfulness. I know you're not a big prayer. You've said that you have no reason to pray to God and ask for forgiveness. I understand that. So if you're not a guy that believes in the power of prayer, try mindfulness. Maybe that'll help you out. Or, hey, I got it. How about this? Just listen to Dr. Fauci. We'll be right back. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.